And now to the important topic of processing. Remember that the theory covered to this point in the course has been about in-memory models. So the data expressed in your model is only as current as the last process. In-memory models therefore require processing to keep data current. Processing can be achieved at different scopes. You can process the entire database. This means the entire model, therefore all tables. You can process an individual table, or you may process individual partitions. And note that processing of partitions can be achieved in parallel. Processing commands are typically scheduled or triggered after a data load process. Let's now take a look at the different commands available. We'll take a look at them in terms of mode, description, and whether they apply at database, table, or partition level. The process default performs processing necessary to achieve a fully processed state. So any object in the model that is not yet processed would be processed. A process full will drop all data and then reprocess all tables. This mode is required when structural changes have been made to your model, and the mode requires the most resources. In fact, you need to be a little careful here is that if you have a large model and you do a process full, to ensure that the current model continues to be available, it will keep it available and then start building an entire another model. That says to us that the memory requirements for our model, our server must have sufficient memory for both the current model and the model that is being fully processed. There's also the process clear, and this removes all data. So note that these three commands apply to database, table, and partition level. We'll now take a look at the process data, and this applies only to tables and partitions. It loads data into these objects without recalculating hierarchies, relationships, and calculated columns. It does imply that you would follow this command at some stage with the process recalc. This applies only at database level, and it updates and recalculates hierarchies, relationships, and calculated columns. Next, we have the process defrag, and this defrags an auxiliary table indexes and helps clean things up. This applies only for table objects. And then lastly, we have the process add. Applying only to partitions, it incrementally updates a partition with new data that you then provide by a where clause. Commonly applied processing scenarios, let's take a look at full and incremental. Issue a process full command to achieve a full processing of a database. And this scenario is by far the simplest, yet it takes the longest period of time. And as I've described, it may require that you have sufficient memory for both the current model and the model that is being processed. Rather than get involved in complex scenarios of how to process, that if I realize on the server that I have the time and the resources, I'm happy to do a full process. Yet in larger models, this may not be practical for reasons of time or user requirements or available resources. So the incremental strategy could be followed like this. We issue process data commands to tables and current partitions that require updating. Or we could issue process add commands to current partitions. And then lastly, we issue the process recalc command to the database. Processing can be automated by SQL Server agent jobs or integration services packages. To automate processing with a SQL Server agent job, you could follow these steps. Generate a script to achieve the processing. Create a SQL Server agent job. Create a step by using the SQL Server Analysis Services command type. And then what you'll do is you'll set the identity by which that job would run. You could use the SQL Server agent account, or you could configure a proxy account that would use its identity for processing. You would then set the server instance and then paste in your process script and then schedule that job to run to the required frequency. Integration services provide several components to automate processing. These include control flow. The analysis services processing task is there to process database objects, or you could use the DDL task that executes scripts, including TMSL scripts, so you could have your custom process commands here. It's also possible in the Enterprise Edition to use data flow, and the partition processing destination supports add full and data-only methods to add data into a partition.